from what we understand, we're all on this earth one time around. Why isn't everybody going after it and living it to the fullest? How is it that, you know, so many of us find ourselves in positions where, like, I can't believe this is happening. Why is this? Why? You know, and why would we continue to let a negative outcome continue to happen? Why is that so prevalent in our society?
Well, I really believe it's because of the conditioning, and what a term that Freud coined, which was called repetition compulsion, meaning that anytime an organism is traumatized or repeatedly conditioned in any situation, such as we are growing up, that we will repeat it over and over again. So I think what you're really talking about is repetition compulsion, where people will just, not consciously but non-consciously, keep repeating the same events, making the same choices. And that's the point about, if you really want change, you have to be willing to go in and change your brain patterning, because you cannot think your way out of a pattern. So many people have tried, or they've tried to just meditate their way out of a particular pattern that they recognize. For example, let's say picking relationships where they're abandoned over and over again, or they feel abandoned, or people that feel that they're in lack and they just can't create enough of what they want. Well, those are examples of patterns that a person is in. And so without making those biochemical changes, we're just going to go out and create the same thing. And I think it's really interesting if people would take a look at the repetitions they have in their life in creating the same patterns, and you just can't think your way out of it, that just because you think an opportunity is come in, that all of a sudden everything's going to be different. I think people experience that a lot with relationships, where they've had bad relationships and then they meet someone else and think it's going to be completely different, and after a short time it's the same thing again. I think that's human nature. I mean, it's part of programming, and how human nature is it takes a lot to be a person that wants to learn how to create something new and different consciously in their life, instead of just repetitively falling into the same old pattern. One of the things that I help patients do, and people can start doing it right away, is to start reframing what's happening in their life. Because when you want to create a new pattern in the brain, you have to be willing to view your circumstance differently. So you can take any circumstance and then turn it into a different experience, just based on how you view it. So our tendency is, if we're having trouble with someone or something, and using the example of my relationship with my sister is a perfect example, where my whole life I was conditioned into a certain relationship with her, where she's an older sister and I was shy and introverted, and she was very outgoing and controlling, and very controlling in terms of wanting everybody to do what she wants. So I grew up in fear of people that had that kind of control or anger issues the way she did, and my father did also. So I was always afraid of people with anger, and at a point in my life where she was still trying to control me and would get really angry about things that we had to work on together was something, and I was in fear a lot of her and generally would just go along with her. So what happened is, when I really dug in and started doing the work that I'm talking about and getting some NET on it and releasing it, because that had been the basis for a lot of the relationships that I'd had in my life, what I would do is, every time she would call me up and yell at me about something, after we hung up, I would reframe it, where I would look at it differently. I would see the value in what she was saying in terms of what the message was, not just her screaming at me about something. And then I would always connect and focus on that her intention underneath it was to be really loving and caring. And most of our conversations at that point were about taking care of my mother. And so I spent some time on really connecting to her heart and how she really just wanted to help, so that by the end of what I focused on after the event, I started feeling better, and I would just focus on that her intention is, it's a really good intention. And then I took steps of whatever I needed to at that point to not allow myself to be in those scenarios with her. But to my surprise, because I never really felt our relationship would improve, over a period of time of me practicing what I'm describing, she became very different in my life, and now we have a wonderful relationship, and it's hard to even remember when we related the way we used to. And that's because I just kept reframing and holding the vision of what I knew was true about her. So any situation you can take that's happening that's upsetting you or challenging, and if you're willing to look at it, and even if you think you're just making it up, like let's say you get fired from your job and that's the worst possible thing. And I've had a lot of clients come in with this issue, and it's devastating, of course, because what are you going to do financially and the whole thing? But if you're willing to look at it and say, well, the only reason this happened is because it isn't really what I wanted, and then you'll find out how you're not happy, and then focus on it happened because I was afraid to let it go, and I want to let something good in my life now that I really want to do, and that's why it happened. So this is my opportunity. So now you're already changing your perspective on it, which of course then opens you up to finding the job of your dreams. I just had that happen with a client recently, and we worked on it with NET, and she just was convinced. She had a high position in the record industry, and was convinced she'd never get another job that allowed her to be with her kids again. And after we worked on changing her point of view on it, and she was focusing on it, and then opportunities started coming in, and then she got the perfect job of her dreams, and it was exactly what she had mapped out and focused on as she got out of the fear of thinking this was a loss and she would never have it again.